Among the Muslim-majority countries, Bangladesh has the third largest Muslim population. It is one of the poorest, but most potential Muslim countries. The entire population of the country is now roughly about 160 million, of which about 90% are Muslims. So demographically, it is one of the most important Muslim countries in the world. It has more Muslims than all the Gulf countries put together. However, the country does not feature adequately in the global Muslim consciousness. Sufferings of Bangladeshi Muslims go largely unnoticed. For example, poor Bangladeshis in the border region are being regularly killed by members of the paramilitary Indian Border Security Force, BSF. Perhaps India-Bangladesh and Israel-Palestine borders are the two sites in the world for such killings. However, while deaths of Palestinians by the Israelis are reported in the regional and international media outlets, those of Bangladeshis by the Indian BSF are hardly reported in the international media. Since Bangladeshi media is hugely influenced or patronized by an influential neighboring country, media coverage of the border killings by BSF is inadequate, even in Bangladeshi newspapers. Inside Bangladesh, things are not any better either. In 2010, the current secular fundamentalist government of Sheikh Hasina scrapped the phrase, "absolute trust and faith in the Almighty Allah," from the country's constitution and replaced it with secularity. This constitutional attack on the faith of the Muslim majority is worse than the physical attacks by the BSF. Hearts of Bangladeshi Muslims bled profusely because of this constitutional change, but the global Muslim community remained largely unconcerned. Political clout in Bangladesh belongs to the secular forces. That's why Islamic people in Bangladesh are regularly discriminated against, and even tortured at institutes of higher learning and in prisons. Their human rights have been flouted and trampled again and again. Assaults on bearded people and on hijab-clad women by the government forces are becoming common in Bangladesh. Madrasa students' higher education and job opportunities are largely restricted. They are not permitted to study some specific subjects at public university, which are crucial for them to enter the government sector or the spheres of influence. Conversely, non-Muslims and secularly oriented Muslims enjoy privileges in educational opportunities and in the job market. Bangladesh Jamaat Islam is the third largest political party in the country. Its student organization, Bangladesh Islami Chhatra Shibir, is arguably the largest and best organized student group in the country. Jamaat was originally established in 1941 by the great thinker Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi. In Bangladesh, Jamaat Shibir's political path has particularly been thorny. Bangladesh was previously known as East Pakistan. It separated from Pakistan in 1971. Jamaat was opposed to separating Bangladesh from Pakistan. It thought that a divided Pakistan would be weak and vulnerable to Indian hegemony. During the 1971 war, Pakistan forces committed large-scale atrocities in Bangladesh. The freedom fighters also killed many Pakistan Biharis who lived in Bangladesh at that time. Thus, through a violent history, Bangladesh was born in 1971.
This town of Mirpur on the outskirts of Dhaka was the victim of the fears and hatreds let loose by the war for freedom from Pakistan. In the miserable buildings live as many as 300,000 people called Biharis, who are different in appearance, language, and ancestry from the Bengalis of Bangladesh. Nearly 2 weeks after the war ended, the Biharis were still afraid to venture outside Mirpur.
Why are you afraid to leave? What do you think would happen if you went out from Mirpur?
If we go to Dhaka from Mirpur, we fear of Bengali people. For nothing, as we haven't done any harm to them, but they want to kill us.
The guerrillas hate the Biharis. They believe the Biharis collaborated with Pakistan and killed many Bengalis during the Pakistani rule.
Since 1971, the enemies of Islam have been associating Jamaat with all the misdeeds of Pakistani army. The fact of the matter is that Jamaat people had nothing to do with the atrocities of the Pakistani army. Jamaat's public support in Bangladesh is not for its stance on 1971's war, but for what it stands for in the current Bangladesh polity. Needless to say, young men and women of its student groups are post-1971 generation. On top of all media hypes that continuously discredit Jamaat, the current regime has implicated topmost Jamaat leaders for 1971 war crimes. Actually, the first Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, through an investigation, identified 195 war criminals in 1973. All of them were Pakistani military officers. He introduced the International Crimes Tribunal Act 1973. The very name of the tribunal suggests that the war criminals were not Bangladeshi. Otherwise, the word international would not be used. However, after diplomatic exchanges between Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, the Bangladesh government decided to follow a forgive and forget policy. So in April 1974, all Pakistani army officers were freed and forgiven. Later on, the Mujib government accused 752 Bangladeshis of collaborating with the Pakistani army. On 31 December 1975, however, the Bangladesh government invalidated the collaborators' law and thus settled the issue once and for all. The secularist Awami League Party was in power from 1996 to 2001. At that time, it did not raise the issue of 1971 war crimes. However, when the party came into power in early 2009, it planned to use the settled 1971 issue for political gain and thus to weaken Bangladesh Jamaat. Since Bangladesh was born, Jamaat people have wholeheartedly accepted it and shown complete loyalty to the country. There is not a single instance to suggest that Jamaat people have desired to rejoin Pakistan or to disregard the liberation that Bangladeshi people proudly achieved in 1971. Any independent survey would suggest otherwise and indicate that they are the most law-abiding group in the country. Corruption rate among Jamaat people is next to zero. 2 of its senior leaders were in the government from 2001 to 2006. Despite many investigations, not a single case of corruption was found in the administering of their ministerial duties. However, in 2010, the current anti-Islamic secularist government revived the defunct 1973 International Crimes Tribunal, ICT. It started imprisoning topmost Jamaat leaders one after another. It fabricated stories, enticed and forced people to witness against them. It threatened and kidnapped defense lawyers and witnesses. The 2012 leakage of Skype conversations between the chief judge of the tribunal and a Brussels-based expatriate Bangladeshi unequivocally reveals the fact that the tribunal and government of Sheikh Hasina have regularly maintained communication and that the government wanted the tribunal to give the death sentence to Jamaat leaders. It also suggests that the judges taught the prosecution witnesses what to say against the defendants.
One member of cabinet actually stated that anyone who gives evidence for Saidi will be considered to be a traitor of the nation and will be dealt with by the public accordingly. So that's the kind of environment that we were forced to operate under.
A national court, however, it is trying international crimes, and the Bangladesh government have withdrawn the national rules of evidence and rights from any accused and given them very restricted rights in the War Crimes Tribunal. In fact, they've withdrawn all the constitutional rights to a fair and impartial trial that an ordinary Bangladesh citizen would have. So it's a very unfair War Crimes Tribunal.
And in fact, the hearing of the first suspect who was due to start his trial today, Delawar Hussain Saidi, that's been delayed amid claims from his team of bias being shown by the tribunal. Does it have any credibility as a war crimes tribunal?
Absolutely not. It's been condemned by the International Bar Association, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and for anybody who studies these issues, you can see why it's unfair. The chairman of the tribunal, and one of the reasons why there's been an allegation of bias, is himself someone who sat on a commission that held investigations against the suspects accused, and is mentioned in one of the exhibits that's a report on those matters and is in the case. So potentially he could be made a defence witness or a prosecution witness. So there is no impartiality about this tribunal at all.
And, you know, for the people who have suffered through these experiences and the families of those who were killed during this war of secession, this is a huge issue because they want to see reconciliation, they want to see justice.
Yeah, that's the point. Your commentator mentioned justice, but you don't get justice by having some sort of unfair rigged trial. What you get there is a stain on your history and something that means that you have to turn to it in years to come. It's already been 41 years since these events took place, and there's a big controversy because in fact they are only trying one side in relation to the matters that happened in the 1971 War of Liberation. There are no prosecutions of the national forces. They've been exempt from prosecution. So you're getting a very biased form of justice.
Human rights organizations have criticized Bangladesh's War Crimes Tribunal.
Because they're opposition leaders, it does obviously look as though the government is taking steps to attack the opposition, and therefore that places a particular responsibility on the government to ensure that the trials that do take place are fair and above dispute. And that is one of the questions that people are raising at the moment.
Bangladeshi prisons are now filled beyond capacity with Jamaat Shibir men and women. While most topmost Jamaat leaders are languishing in prisons for years with false charges of crimes against humanity, ordinary Jamaat Shibir leaders and activists are being tortured in the street. Muslims around the world should consider carefully whether they would let more Sayyid Qutbs be executed or not. According to the Turkish scholar and leader Yilmaz Balcin, if the political power insists on this wrongful attitude and proceeds with its intention to execute the leaders of the Jamaati Islami Party, the murders committed will be comparable to those committed in the Karbala incident.